everyone. I'm Sharanya. My pronouns are she, her, and I am Food Empowerment Project's Executive Director. I'm going to describe myself. I have short, dark hair. I'm of South Indian origin, and I'm wearing a yellow top with flowers on it. We really appreciate you taking the time to share your Sunday with us. Welcome to event 2 of our Eat Your Ethics 4-part series. We are so excited to have you here with us. For those who don't know who we are, Food Empowerment Project is a vegan food justice organization that was founded in 2007 by a very proud Chicanx woman, Lauren Ornelas, who you will hear from during today's event. We work on a variety of issues with 4 core programmatic areas. We promote ethical veganism for the animals through education, outreach, and providing culturally relevant resources to help individuals go and stay vegan. We advocate for the rights of farm workers by supporting corporate, legislative, and regulatory changes. We work with community members to survey access to healthy foods in Black and Brown communities. And we work to inform consumers around the globe about the worst forms of child labor, including slavery, that take place for chocolate. The goal of our event series is to provide you with information and resources that will help you eat with your ethics. In today's event, we will be covering bees who are exploited for their honey, birds including ducks, chickens, and turkeys raised and killed for food, farm workers who pick the food that feeds us all, and we will give you ideas for how to lend your voice. And of course, we will have a Q&A at the end, so be sure to utilize that Q&A box at the bottom of your screen to send us your questions. If you attended our last event, you will remember that we ran out of time before we could answer all of your questions. We made a separate video and we sent it out after the event so that we could respond to them all. This time, if needed, we are planning on staying longer than the allotted time for the event to answer all of your questions, so please do send them in. Also, we've opened up the chat box, so say hello and tell us where you're joining us from. And finally, we have enabled live transcript or closed captions for this event, and you can enable that by clicking the CC live transcript box at the bottom of your screen. For those of you tuning in today, we will send a follow-up email with resources that will be shared during this event, and we will send you a survey to get your input on how we can improve future events. As a reminder, we have 2 more events in this series, on August 15th and October 24th, where we will show you all more ways to eat with your ethics. As we begin this event, we would like to take a moment to acknowledge the land that we are currently residing on. We recognize that this land was stolen from the original inhabitants of these areas, and we want to take a moment to honor, remember, and pay our respects to the elders, both past and present, who have stewarded this land for generations. As we honor Asian American and Pacific Islander AAPI Heritage Month, we are excited to share a prize with 1 lucky participant who stays until the very end of today's event. The prize will include our recipe booklets, vegan Mexican food and vegan Filipino food, stickers, and more. So stay tuned until the very end for a chance to win. Before we begin, I'm curious to know how many of you attending today's event are vegan or are here to learn about why we should all be considering veganism. We're going to bring up a quick poll on screen for you to answer, and we will give you a few seconds to choose your response. So how many of you are vegan for less than 6 months, have been vegan for 6 months to 2 years, vegan for 2 years or more, or are here because you're interested in going vegan? Wow, so I see we have representation from all of the options that we mentioned, which is amazing. Thank you all for being here, and we welcome you all again to today's event. None of what we're doing at Food Empowerment Project would be possible without our entire close-knit team working tirelessly every day to advance our mission. You will meet our staff throughout this event. We're going to kick off today's event by sharing some information about bees who are exploited for their honey.
Let's talk about all the buzz around honeybees. The western honeybee, or Aphis mellifera, is the bee species most of you are familiar with. Don't let their name fool you. They can be found on every continent except Antarctica and are believed to have originated in Africa or Asia. Just like with birds, bees also start with the egg. Did you know that honeycombs are not just for storing honey that will be used later for food, but are also a nursery for housing all the eggs? A single egg is placed inside each hexagonal cell and sealed. The eggs hatch and a baby bee, a larva, emerges without eyes or legs yet. They remain in their hexagonal cell being taken care of by worker bees who act as nurses. The babies feed on the honey for about a week. Then a nurse bee will seal them in their hexagonal cells. This is the time when the baby bee spins the cocoon, undergoing their final metamorphosis and becoming an adult bee. Each hive has a single queen, and she is responsible for laying all the eggs. While the majority of bees live short lives of only a few weeks to a few months, depending on the season, the queen lives 3 to 5 years. The vast majority of bees who hatch will be worker bees. They are responsible for everything from taking care of the hive to nursing young bees to foraging for pollen and nectar. Their age denotes what their job is. For example, older worker bees are the ones who leave the hive to forage. Worker bees are essential to honey production, each one working incredibly hard, but ultimately only producing very little honey themselves. Though it varies, most bees only make about 1/12 a teaspoon of honey their entire life. I don't know about you, but I find it heartbreaking to think that they only make 1/12 of a teaspoon in their life, and yet when someone buys a jar of honey, how many lives did it take to make that? Honeybees have a delicate sense of smell, and it is just one way they find flowers. They also have very sophisticated eyes, and not just 2 eyes, but 5. They are able to see ultraviolet patterns that humans are unable to see. They can see and smell flowers, but did you know they can also feel for flowers from far away? Flowers have electromagnetic fields, and bees can feel them with their sensitive hairs and antennae. Did you know that bees dance to communicate? It's called a waggle dance, and they do it to let others know there is more nectar or pollen. Honey is essential to bees. It is their source of nutrition and energy. During cold seasons, when there is little to no flowers in bloom, honeybees rely on their stores of honey to survive. They will huddle together inside the hive to keep their body temperature up and eat the honey until it gets warm again so they can once again venture out to forage. It is also used by nursing bees to feed the babies to ensure they are getting all the nutrients they need. The colony works together as one to make and store honey for the entire hive. This is how honeybees live in their natural habitat. In honey production, a normal practice is to clip the queen's delicate wings so she cannot leave the hive. The bee's queen is often replaced once a year by killing her and introducing a new queen who may have been shipped across the country from a bee farm. Her life is cut short from the 3 to 5 years she would live in the wild to just maintain honey production for human consumption. When honey is stolen from the bees, smoke is often forced into the hive. This overwhelming experience subdues the sensitive bees while they would otherwise be on alert to protect their hive. They are literally disoriented, unable to communicate to each other, and confused. Unable to protect themselves and their hive, their honey is unnecessarily taken from them. The beekeepers will also regularly hurt or kill bees in the process of obtaining honey. With the bees being subdued, large screens containing the honeycomb are pulled out of the hive. This will painfully crush or tear apart a bee, removing their legs or wings in the process. It doesn't matter if someone is a backyard beekeeper or taking honey on a commercial level. It is impossible for them to avoid this harm. Because of this, many of us do not consume honey since we do our best not to contribute to the pain and suffering of others. Veganism is wanting to be sure not to cause unnecessary harm to non-human animals from birds to bees. Honey is pretty easy to avoid and is easy to replace. There are many alternatives to honey that do not involve using honeybees, including maple syrup, agave nectar, date paste, and rice syrup.
I hope you all learned more than you ever knew before about bees and their complex and beautiful lives. We're going to bring up a quick poll. What is your favorite alternative to honey? Is it agave nectar, maple syrup, date paste, brown rice syrup, or do you currently use honey but are looking forward to trying one of these alternatives? Wow, it's great to see the majority of our supporters who are here today like maple syrup. That's my personal favorite as well. Next, our founder Lauren and I will talk about some of her undercover investigations. While many bird species are exploited for food, today we will focus on ducks, chickens, and turkeys. I will be interviewing Lauren about her experiences. Before we begin, I do want to warn you that some of her most impactful experiences might be hard to hear. So if you need to, please mute us while we discuss these issues. Lauren, I know many of us, including myself, have admired you for your long-term commitment to animals. You and I have had many conversations about the terrible things that happen to birds, regardless of species. Could you start us off by telling everyone about what these birds go through and what did you witness firsthand?
Sure. I'll do a quick description of myself. I have short, dark hair. I am of Mexican descent, and I'm wearing a yellow dress, and my pronouns are she, her. I think that one of the things that's consistent across the board when you look at hens who are raised for eggs and ducks who are raised for their flesh, as well as turkeys, is the types of mutilations that take place. That instead of giving some of these animals more room, they take off parts of their body. So, keeping hens in cages for eggs, they cut off the tips of their beaks. Um, Ducks who are raised for their flesh, they have the tips of their bills cut off, and turkeys who are raised for their flesh have the tips of their beaks cut off, as well as their toes, for a variety of reasons, all just so that they can be bred for human consumption. Um, they are typically kept in incredibly crowded conditions, similar to what you see in the videos. And I think that was one of the most striking things about doing investigations on my own was, I went, first saw my animal rights video in 1987 and did my first investigations in maybe 1999. So having the reality of what I saw in those videos being literally what it was that I was investigating. And the investigations are things I never thought I could do when I saw those videos was just like I could never do something like that, but when you have to, you do. And the smells are something that you can never get across to people when they're watching these. They can see what's happening, but they can't smell it. They can't inhale the ammonia that's inside that's going to burn your lungs for days. I saw a lot of birds who couldn't stand up, a lot who were sick. And the most precious thing is like how gentle all of these birds are. I mean, their bodies are so small and so tiny, and yet all of this takes place so that people can consume them.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. That is really hard to hear, um, especially the fact that some people are doing so many terrible things to these animals that are still so gentle, like you said. Speaking of gentle birds, I know you've said that ducks hold a very special place in your heart. Can you tell us about one of your experiences with ducks that particularly stood out to you and what you witnessed while you were investigating that industrial facility or factory farm?
Sure. I mean, ducks, I did the first investigations of duck farms in the US. and traveled around the country to get the footage, basically because I ran a campaign to get grocery stores to stop selling duck meat. And in the process, I liberated, as well as some of my friends, liberated some of these ducks. And one of the things to know about ducks who are raised in the farms is they're raised in very similar situations to chickens who are raised for food. But in addition to the crowded conditions, the fact that they're indoors, is that they don't have, ducks need to have enough water to immerse themselves. Otherwise, they can go blind, they can't maintain their body temperature. But what happens in these facilities is they're basically given water through these pipes that just drop water down on them. And so that isn't enough for them to immerse themselves at all. And it's heartbreaking because you'll see the ducklings with their little bills trying to get water, splashing it on themselves, but they can't. So at one point in time, when we liberated some ducklings from a farm in Southern California who still were yellow from their down, they hadn't even had their feathers yet. When we took them from the farm, we realized they didn't know how to drink water. So we couldn't give them a bowl with water because they weren't quite sure what to do with it. And so we actually had water bottles and we popped holes in the top of the plastic, and we were able to get them water that way so that they would just look up, kind of like they had in the farm, and be able to get some water. And it wasn't until eventually I was able to get them to a bathtub to where they could fully immerse themselves, that they're able to drink and really, be more in more natural situations.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. That is just so sad because these animals in their natural habitat, like you said, would have had access to ample water because that's where they gravitate towards. So yeah. I know also, speaking about other species of birds, many people will have heard about chickens being raised for food. So let's talk about one of your investigations into chicken facilities. What did you expect to see and what did you actually witness?
Well, I saw what I expected to. I would say that one of the differences is realizing that farms, depending on where they're located, can be different. So in California, where the weather is a bit better, they actually had flaps that would open on the sides. But in Georgia, they were completely indoors, and so the ammonia there. I mean, my lungs like burned for a couple days after visiting that one because the ammonia on the flooring. Um, One of the weirdest things is, again, chickens who are raised for meat are killed at about 7 weeks old. So they're babies, they're literally babies. But because of the way that they're bred, when you go into these facilities, their bodies can be quite large, but their voices are still little baby chirps. And it's just so weird to see these big bodies in these little baby chirps. And again, because of the fast rate in which they're bred, their legs can't always hold up their bodies. So there's numerous chickens who have fallen over, who can't stand up. And for me, it was really the quantity, the incredible amount of chickens, shed after shed after shed with, tens of thousands of birds in them. And it was just, for me, it was heartbreaking. I thought I could take 100 chickens out of here and nobody would even know. That's how many there are. And in fact, actually, one of the farms, when I left, I actually collapsed just at the weight of the thought of how can I help these when there's so many birds? What can we do? So it's overwhelming, on your mind and on your heart.
Yeah, absolutely. And actually, just to go back to something that you mentioned before, in case our listeners or people tuning in today are not aware, can you just tell them about the ammonia and where that comes from?
The ammonia comes from the waste from the birds. And what happens is that it's not as if they're cleaning out these sheds every time they go in and they kill all these birds. They're just putting more litter on the top. So you may have, again, 7 weeks is all that they live. So you have more layering of litter being put on the ground instead of cleaning it out. It's just being layered. So the ammonia really builds up and it burns your eyes. And for me, it was my lungs that were burning, but I was in there a short amount of time compared to these little chicks, that who are closer to the ground and who were there for that entire time, how it must burn them. And of course, we know that it does burn the bottoms of their feet as well.
And also, speaking of chickens, I know you've visited some so-called humane cage-free or free-range egg facilities where hens were being raised to lay eggs. Can you tell us about that experience?
Yeah, I mean, I think we know that the reality is that there's no such label. There's no true label of humanely raised or anything like that. And I think it's always important that remember that even if these farms are small, they still engage in some of the exact same practices that the larger so-called factory farms or industrialized size farms, whatever term wants to be used, even though they're small, doesn't mean they're not using the exact same practices. So, they can still be killing the male chicks in the egg industry because they're no use to them. The farm that I went to, which is in Petaluma, California, which used to be known as like the butter and eggs city. And the birds were not in cages, but it was one of those quote unquote cage free facilities, but they were completely enclosed in a shed and they were debeaked. They still had the tips of their beaks cut off. And there were rats, rats chasing after the birds. And this was a so called humane farm where they were actually had the brown eggs, which are considered to be healthier. But this was the situation in this facility. And again, it's just, again, every time you look behind the barn door or whatever, you're going to find this type of suffering and abuse, regardless if it's a small farm or large farm, because this is just part of what it takes to raise and kill animals for food.
Right. Yeah. And these people that have these facilities and are in this business, that's all they see it as. They're putting profit above these individual lives that
Oh,
to
yes.
us are very important. I know related to eggs, one of the lesser known birds that's also abused for their eggs is quail. And you've told me about an investigation into one such facility that particularly stuck with me. Can you share that experience with everyone?
Sure. Another activist and I were trying to collect data and research for a potential piece of legislation to kind of close up a loophole in California law. And it required us to, look out, the lesser thought of birds who were killed for food. And we went what we thought was going to be an office for a company that raised quail. And what we actually walked into was the slaughterhouse and again, the slaughterhouse, it doesn't mean that it's big and it's got these conveyor belts. It's where they kill animals. And we were startled, and the two women who worked there were clearly startled as well. And what we saw were, like I tell you before, I go back when I think of it, and it's always really hard. Um, but we saw the women were holding the quail and inserting a device into their anus and electrocuting them. And there were other quail looking down in the cages, and there were a lot of little baby eggs there. So we knew that they were, using these quail for two different purposes. And you just never know what you're going to find. But it's going to be for the non-human animals. It's going to be definitely cruelty and death.
And I will just say thank you so much for going through that and being able to witness it on our behalf and being able to share that with everyone so that, we can really see behind that barn door, as you said before. Um, Another bird species that's abused, particularly around the end of the year in the US, is the turkey. Could you share your experience with liberating one very special turkey?
Yeah, I mean, a friend and I we always would go by and investigate the slaughterhouses. And this was a foster farm slaughterhouse in Central California. And we would drove by just to see if there were any animals, see what was going on. And we saw this turkey running around at the slaughterhouse. They were done doing the killing, but there was no human there. But there was this turkey running around, and turkeys are incredibly curious animals. And there was this door, kind of like to the office, and it was one of those doors that was reflective. So she was literally looking at herself and pecking at the door. And we knew we had to go get her. My friend was like, "Well, we have to get her," and I was like, "Shoot, yeah, we do." And so my friend hopped over the fence and was running around after her because she was a turkey. She didn't know what she was doing. And so eventually I threw over my sweatshirt and she grabbed my sweatshirt, which she threw over the turkey. And the most interesting part of this story is the fact that she actually lifted the turkey. And if y'all don't know me, but I'm not even 5 feet tall. And I had to stretch my body as much as I could to get the turkey back over the fence. And I thought, even if I have to rip myself in half, I'm going to get this turkey. And we did it right where the sign said no trespassing. So we got this bird and we took off. I could have sworn there was a security guard, and we were like, we're driving. If we have to get to Mexico, we are not letting him take this bird back. We ended up naming her Taylor, and Taylor probably went through something that most of our minds, at least my mind, literally does not want to comprehend. She was covered in blood because more than likely she fell when they hung her upside down and fell into the blood of all the other turkeys. And she ran away. And her toes were cut so far down that she could barely stand up, and her beak was cut so far down she could barely eat. But we were able to get her to a sanctuary, who had to work really hard to get the blood off of her because it had caked on. But it's just what these animals go through. And Taylor's no longer with us, but she sure meant everything to us to know that we were able to get her out of there, especially the unimaginable trauma, not even just physical pain, but the trauma of seeing all the other turkeys being killed.
Yeah, thank you for sharing these experiences. I know it's sometimes hard to go back, but at least in the case of Taylor, you know that what you did for her was her best possible outcome at that point. So thank you for doing that. Can you share one thing that may have surprised you about these birds, about the individuals?
Yeah, I think it's just how much they kept their personalities. I mean, even in one of the worst sheds that I investigated of turkeys, where the turkeys were shivering, like literally physically shivering, because they were not doing well. When I would go down to take pictures and video, they were still poking in at my camera. I still had pictures of their little beaks trying to look in at my camera because they are such curious animals. And even in that, that their personality shone through. And I think that's what stuck out to me. And that's for a lot of the animals, even the pig farms that I investigated, that the pigs, when they had enough room, would literally run like little dogs, even though they couldn't run very far and their ears would flap up, that their personalities were still something that couldn't be taken away from them.
Yeah, it definitely sounds like it. And like you said before, just the fact that despite everything that's going on around them, and these are smart animals, they probably knew what was going to happen based on what they were seeing or hearing. The fact that they were still able to keep their personalities, I think, is just so amazing. Thank you for sharing your insights and your experiences with everyone, Lauren. I really appreciate you and all that you do every day at Food Empowerment Project. And I know that I speak on behalf of the whole team, and they feel this way too. So thank you.
And we feel the same about you. So thank you.
Thank you. Before we move on, we're going to launch another quick poll. Which of the following do you think can be made without eggs? Is it cake, mayonnaise, donuts, brownies, omelets, cookies, or all of the above? Well, look at that. You're all pros at this already. You found a trick question. You caught us. You can actually make all of the above mentioned foods without using eggs. And we did throw in a trick question just to see, but you all aced it. Thank you for responding. As I mentioned at the beginning of today's program, one of our core programmatic areas is advocating for the rights of farm workers. We wanted you to hear about their experiences from them in their own words. We're now going to share a short video called An Impossible Education that was made by Fusion. And following that, Lauren will come back to talk about our programs that seek justice for those who pick the produce that sustains all of us.
It's summer vacation, but instead of attending camp or playing soccer, brothers Alejandro and Virgilio are getting ready for a long day working in the fields. It's boiling hot, and the work is agonizing. They can pick up to 1,000 boxes of these chilies in a day, stopping only once the task is done.
I would like to be working in a not as heavy stuff job. Probably I'll study agriculture, or I might want to be something else just in case.
There are 500,000 child migrants like the Moreno brothers in the U.S. Their family came here from Guanajuato, Mexico 12 years ago. They move between North Carolina and Florida at least twice a year following the harvest. Virgilio is 14 and his brother is 16. Alejandro has learning difficulties and has already had to repeat a year.
Hey guys, how's it going?
You good?
Good. All right.
Dedicated tutors like Aureli Perez Nava try to ease the academic and emotional toll on migrant students.
I think some of the biggest difficulties for them are being able to socialize, to create those relationships with their friends and with their teachers, and feeling comfortable and feel a part of something. I think they're moving around so much that they don't really ever get to settle and say, this is where I'm from, this is where I belong.
Before you leave, and make sure and figure out if we can get a physical before you leave, and then that way you can take it over there, and I think that should help.
Yes.
And that way you don't have to worry about it when you're in Florida.
There is no downtime like a normal student has. You know, they're in the field, their backs hurt, and then they have to come to school on Monday, and they realize they forgot to do their math homework, and they don't want to carry their math book and their science book and their history book all. They're tired. I've often heard them say, what's the point?
Migrant children have some of the highest dropout rates in the U.S.
Right now, I'm putting my lunch bag, getting my lunch bag ready, taking my snacks, because I work more than 10 hours and I have to have a break.
Alejandro and Virgilio's 19-year-old sister, Ever, is one of them.
I started first grade and I will go to sleep in every class because I didn't know what was going on. They never had a translator for me. They never told me anything. They would just do everything in English. Nobody was able to help me.
She spends her days packing tomatoes in the same factory as her mom, Sergi, but she wants to escape.
Really stressful. The machine is on every day. You come out with headaches.
And you've got to get these two.
For the last 2 years, she's been taking night classes, trying to complete the diploma she didn't get the first time around.
You have to divide it by those 20 local.
Sergi's long hours and limited English make it difficult for her to help her kids with their homework.
Cuando yo llego no les puedo chequear porque llego a hacerles de cenar, o aunque les chequeé yo no le entiendo si lo hicieron bien o no lo hicieron. Yo nomás lo que les digo, no me mientan hijos porque saben que yo no entiendo ni sé si está bien o no.
Hoy no te dejan.
The Morenos are legal residents, so they qualify for free home tutoring.
Good job.
Their school also tries to accommodate students like them by offering a daily free period where they can get individual help.
Sometimes I get home and I don't have time no more, and I just leave it. And having that extra 30 minutes to do homework and stuff helps me a lot, to achieve my homeworks and get better grades.
But getting a consistent education is almost impossible. Subjects, grades, and credits rarely match up precisely between states.
So one teacher here might be teaching how to multiply, and the teachers in Florida might be teaching them how to divide. It's hard. There's a lot of classes that they're having to repeat. They get held back. There's students who should be juniors and they're still considered freshmen because their credits didn't transfer over.
Because that was your last test,
Today, the Morenos get some good news.
guess what you have?
Ever has passed the last exam she needs to get her high school diploma.
It's a diploma and it's for me.
She plans to study cosmetology, But getting the funding for college is her next challenge.
That I could get a scholarship. If nobody's able to help me out to pay my college, I will work until I'm able to pay my own college. I could get a loan, and I'll try anything.
As fall arrives, the work in North Carolina starts drying up. The Morenos are packing for their move to Immokalee, Florida.
You're barely getting used to the house you're living in. It's barely feeling like home when you have to move all over again.
Virgilio and Alejandro are just 2 months into the school year, and they're on the road again. They don't even know whether they'll be able to enroll in Immokalee High School when they arrive. When they get to Florida, they set off to register for school. But Alejandro's told his grades aren't up to scratch.
That's like messed up because I wanted to keep on going to school. So if I miss a semester this year, if I miss a credit, I probably won't be able to come to high school.
The Morenos will stay in Florida until the spring, but any stability is temporary. The harvest will draw them north again, and the next move is never far from their minds.
So, hope everybody was able to watch that video. One of the main reasons why Food Empowerment Project works on farm worker justice issues is because unless you pick all your own food, you really have a farm worker to thank for feeding you. And again, that's not just for vegans, that's for everybody. But as an organization that's ethically based, looking at how those from every aspect of life are impacted by our food choices, we think it's important that we most definitely highlight farm workers. A lot of the farm workers, you saw about their children, but a lot of the farm workers are experiencing homelessness. They live in cardboard boxes and pickup trucks because they simply do not make enough money. Even though they're working all the time, they're not making enough money to put a roof over their head. In fact, many of them can't even afford the food that they're picking themselves. Farm workers experience sexual assault. Their working conditions are horrific. They don't have many of the same benefits as other workers do. Some make overtime. I think just a couple of states have passed that now, but it's not the vast majority of farm workers who receive many benefits that other workers do. In Sonoma County, which is where our organization used to be based, the Latinx population had some of the highest rates of COVID. And that's because a lot of the farm workers in Sonoma County work for the wine industry, and the wine industry was still keeping the farm workers in things like bunk beds. And again, because the farm workers are living in horrific conditions, working in horrific conditions, many of them, the ones that aren't experiencing homelessness, may live like 16 to a 1-bedroom. So things like distancing yourself, social distancing for 6 feet was actually a privilege that many farm workers didn't have. So you had incredibly high rates of COVID in these communities. And you also had the growers who tended to be conservative, who didn't believe that COVID even existed. So when farm workers asked for things like soap and water, they were literally laughed at. And I think it's important to look at this slide that we have here that shows that in Sonoma County, we didn't have the highest rate of the Latinx community, but the Latinx community had some of the highest rates of COVID with no underlying conditions. And I think it's really important that we recognize why many Black, Brown, and Indigenous people in the United States had such high rates of COVID. And that's because things like some underlying conditions, such as type 2 diabetes, can't be measured in the same way that racism, fear of deportation, and other things like that could be measured. So those stressors would lower your immune system and increase your risks of COVID. Now, for Food Empowerment Project, we also, where we were based was also where the fires were. And unfortunately, again, in Sonoma County, you had wineries as well as the dairy industry forcing workers to work in mandatory evacuation zones. And what that means is that these are areas that the county deemed so unsafe that people living there needed to leave, to flee, to be safe. And yet the agricultural industry still found ways to require these workers to work where these fires were taking place. So some of Food Empowerment Project's work to try to, lend our voices to the farm workers, to try to improve the lives of farm workers, one of which was we were successful in working with another organization and getting a 50-mile regulation changed in California. And what the 50-mile regulation did was it required those farm workers living in labor camps to move 50 miles away when the picking season was over. So if you let me use an example of one of the labor camps that was near in Santa Cruz in California, where the picking season started in May. So that's when the families could move into the labor camp. And then the picking season ended around November, which would mean that in November, the family would have to move 50 miles away in order to be allowed to go back into that labor camp the next year, which means it was a little cheaper housing. That meant that their children could not complete the school year. In fact, one of the women we work with, she, after working in that labor camp for 20 years, she only knew one young woman who had ever graduated from high school. So we were successful in getting this regulation changed, what now means that the children are able to stay in the labor camps to finish the school year. One of the other things we do is during COVID, we ask the farm workers that we work with, what is it that would help you right now? What do you need? And first they needed immediate school supplies for their kids. And the next thing they needed simply was food. So we work with a lot of farm workers who are indigenous from Mexico, primarily from Oaxaca. And these are some pictures. And actually all of you, everybody who donated, helped us get the foods to people who were considered essential workers, but not receiving any of the benefits of essential workers. So these are some wonderful pictures of some of the farm workers and their children that we were able to feed. We also work on an annual school supply drive for the children of farm workers. We do this every year as a way to say thank you to the farm workers. We do not do this as an act of charity. We do this as helping to right an injustice that's taking place against farm workers. So we do the school supply drive so their children know how important they are, how much we want them to succeed. Their families are sacrificing so much for them to have a better life that we want to help and we want to contribute. And so we're going to be doing that again this year, starting next month in June, will be our school supply drive again for the children of farm workers, where we ask you to donate brand new backpacks, have them shipped to our office, or donate to us so to make sure that we can buy the backpacks and the school supplies. Now, one of the things that's different this year is that some of the kids are able to go back in school, but because of the fear and the spread of COVID, a lot of the water fountains are going to be turned off, which means that the kids who don't have water bottles aren't going to be able to have any way of getting water when they're at school. So what we're trying to do is also include a reusable water bottle with every backpack, and they will have inspirational messages for the kids, and we'll be able to put one with every backpack. So that is what we're going to be doing this year, and we really hope you can support. And again, we'll be doing the school supply drive June 1st through June 30th. And I think they've already posted information in the chat, so you can check out the link where you can donate or just send us brand new backpacks. Thanks.
Hi, everybody. My name is Amanda. My pronouns are she and they, and I'm Food Empowerment Project's Campaigns Associate. To describe myself, I am a white Jewish person with long dark hair, and I am wearing glasses and a yellow shirt. So for those of us who want to do right by the farm workers, we know that we can't simply stop eating produce. So we are going to give you some things that we recommend. And the first thing that you can do is you can lend your voice and echo the needs of farm workers via corporate campaigns and legislation. So one, you can support boycotts called by farm workers, such as those called by the Coalition of Immokalee Workers against Wendy's and Publix grocery store for not joining the Fair Food Program. And also support the boycott of Driscoll's berries, which is called by the San Quintin farm workers in Mexico. Remember, it's more than just not buying their products. It's also letting the companies know that you are not buying them and why, which is that you support farm worker rights. Also keep an eye out for any regulatory or legislative efforts that seek to aid farm workers and their rights, act on them, and share them with us and others. Keep an eye out on our social media to stay informed about this. And then lastly, you can spread the word about our annual school supply drive, as Lauren just mentioned, for the children of farm workers, which lasts this year throughout the month of June.
Hi, everyone. My name is Elise. My pronouns are she and her. I'm Food Empowerment Projects Development Associate. I'm going to describe myself. I have long red hair and I'm of Irish descent, and I'm wearing a yellow top. So one other thing that you can do is to choose organic and strive to buy organic whenever possible to lessen the toxins on farm workers. Since we all need to eat produce and don't always know how the workers are treated, we encourage you to buy organic when you can, so at least you know the workers are not being doused with agricultural chemicals. And we know organic can be expensive, so maybe try to buy one thing that's organic each time you shop. You can also buy local and support the farmers market in your community, and especially Black and brown farmers. Buying local certainly helps the environment and the local economy, and if you can make it to one, farmers markets are a great place to get some fresh, delicious produce directly from the farmers. Even better is if you can make sure to go out of your way to support Black and brown farmers who tend to face more barriers to be in business.
As I said before, we will send everyone a follow-up email with a list of resources, but here are some books and documentaries that you can use to learn more about these issues. Before we get into the Q&A, let's do our giveaway. Are you all ready for this? Okay, I'm just going to bring up my screen. Okay, here we go. The winner of today's giveaway is Yasmin Wolven. Congratulations, Yasmin. We will be sending you an email, Yasmin, after the event to get your shipping address, so please watch for that message from us. Before we get into the Q&A, I would like to bring the rest of the team on, and I would love for our newest team member to introduce herself.
Hi, my name's Megan. My pronouns are she, her. I am Food Empowerment Project's Executive and Programs Assistant. I am a Chinese American and I have long dark hair, and I'm also wearing a yellow top.
Thank you, Megan. And thank you for sending in your questions. We will go right into them. And Amanda, if you wouldn't mind helping moderate some of the questions over to us, that would be great.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, everyone, for your questions. I'm going to go to the first one we have for the live answering. Somebody's asking, I wonder why we as vegans should care about insects. Is there a line? If ants are in my house, do I just leave them be? See that pun there? Why do bees seem to have a special status with vegans?
Lauren, I'm wondering if that might be something that you help respond to.
Sure. I mean, I don't know that bees have any other special status that maybe all animals do to us. I think that maybe insects tend to come up more in vegan circles because of honey, because we are people who don't want to consume or wear anything that harms non-human animals. So I think that honeybees probably come up just as much as silkworms might, who is another insect. So I think it's just more a matter of what is something that we deal with in our everyday lives, from the clothes we wear to the foods that we eat, and that's probably why they come up. And I think that it's again just a reminder that we're just doing our best to not cause harm. And so we don't need to consume honey, we don't need to wear silk. So these are easy ways in which we can try to eliminate some of the suffering in the world when it comes to non-human animals. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, and if I can just jump in as well, I feel like those two that you mentioned, Lauren, are especially ones that stand out because there is a like very clear case of humans exploiting those animals, like keeping them essentially in farm conditions, factory farm conditions, just so we can get something that is their product. So, whether it's honey, which is the food for bees, or the silk from the cocoons of silkworms, which is to protect their body while they're going through a metamorphosis. I think in that sense, bees and silkworms potentially, for me, seemed a little bit different than ants, and in the sense that they come up a lot during the conversations because of the exploitation involved.
Awesome. Thank you both for those answers. Next, we're going to go to Rally's question. What can we do besides just being vegan?
I would say, I think as a part of Food Empowerment Project, we definitely say going vegan is a great way to be able to eat with your ethics. But as you've seen throughout the event, we've covered some of the other issues that we're working on. And so whether it comes to making sure that you're able to source the food that you are consuming in a way that doesn't harm, either the people or the planet. And so just keeping things like that in mind, supporting, lending your voice to a farm worker called boycotts. And also in FEP's case, one of the other issues that we work on is chocolate. And so making sure that, just because it's vegan chocolate doesn't mean that it's cruelty free, in the sense that it still involves extreme abuse when it comes to individuals who are actually picking the cocoa that gets made into the chocolate. And so keeping all of that in mind and going beyond just the food itself and looking at all of the labor issues as well that go beyond that. And Lauren, feel free to add anything to that I might have misspoken about.
I'm just adding in our tips.
Oh yes,
our
that's
top
great.
15 eating tips. So I think that going vegan, if you have access to healthy food, certainly is a great step. But what we're trying to do is show everybody how all of our food is connected and all the choices that we make impact one another. And so any step that you can start taking to think about the planet, human animals, non-human animals, locally and globally, is going to have a tremendous impact on making our world a more just and equitable place.
Great, thank you. And then I have a question from Norman. I think Norman might have just logged off, but I'll say it for everybody else to hear. Is there a resource with a list of farms providing humane conditions to their workers? Thank you. And I'd suggested checking out the Fair Food Program. I don't know, Lauren, if you want to elaborate any more on that.
Yeah, I mean, there's the Fair Food Program, which is part of the Coalition of Immokalee Workers. And these are farms that have signed on to their program to do things such as simply pay 1 more penny per pound for the tomatoes that they pick. And ironically, as little as 1 more penny per pound is, some corporations are still fighting it. And yet that 1 penny per pound has been proven to make a drastic improvement in the lives of farm workers. And that's why it's so important. But there's other things, there's restaurant workers, there's fast food workers, there's other organizations out there really looking at the impacts, of workers. So there's a website called coworker.org. They're often posting petitions for people to sign on behalf of DoorDash workers or Trader Joe's workers or Whole Foods workers. And that's another great place and to figure out how you can help.
Awesome, thanks, Lauren. Okay, another question is, do you have a list of resources on what boycotts are happening that we should support? I only know of Driscoll's.
Oh, Lauren, I was hoping you could just tag into that one from what you were saying before.
Sure. I mean, there's the San Quintin boycott, the Driscolls, but there's also the Wendy's and Publix. I don't know that anybody was in the Southeast, Texas, I don't believe. I'm from Texas. I don't believe we have Publix, but Florida definitely has Publix. But there's also a boycott against Wendy's and Publix called by the Coalition of Immokalee Workers. And although I would say that that doesn't mean that every farm then treats the farm workers well. It's just that our organization is going to respect the boycotts called by farm workers themselves because they are in the best position to determine what would help and improve their lives. So at this point in time, I would say the vast majority of farms are not treating the farm workers well. But in terms of the boycotts being called by farm workers, those are the ones that we know of at this time. And if you all find out of any more, please definitely let us know. But those are the two that we know of.
Awesome. All right, so Rally has another question. Should I support all farmers markets? I feel like some just buy produce to sell there.
I can start trying to answer that one, and anyone else, please feel free to jump in to respond as well. I would say that one of the things that I love doing when I'm at a farmer's market is actually talking with the individuals behind the table and getting to know who they are. A lot of times it will be the same faces that you will see if you end up going to a farmer's market on a regular basis. It will be the same individuals who are at the table. So ask questions if you're not sure. I don't believe that I've ever seen a stand at a farmer's market selling produce that they've just purchased from elsewhere to sell at the stand. But maybe that's just the farmer's market near me that isn't that way. So I don't know if anyone else has experienced that.
Yeah, I do have another recommendation as well. Oftentimes farmers markets, they're put on by a larger organization that maybe does multiple farmers markets within the area. So you can also check out their website to see what vendors are going to be there. Sometimes they'll have specific information on the farms, and then you can do a little research into those practices on those farms particularly. So yeah, if you're, in the Bay Area, there's the Pacific Coast Farmers Market Association and various ones. You can just find out which farmers market association maybe help set up yours, or maybe it's set up on its own too, but definitely researching on the web.
And I was going to say, Amanda, don't we have a link on our website that you could share that people can find their farmers markets? I think that might be a good one to put in the chat.
Yeah, absolutely. I actually, Lauren, I saw you nodding. If you know where that link is, then let me know.
It's on the farmers market page.
On the farmers market page. Okay.
Yeah,
great.
and I think
you.
Sure. And then one of the things that that I just want to mention is that there is a problem with some of the stalls, the growers who literally are going to the farmers markets in Black and brown communities because they have to do that until they can get into, say, something like Santa Monica. And that's a problem. And I think that that's one of the reasons why we do believe in more community-based and community level and supporting Black and brown farmers, because a lot of them are doing that because they've seen the need in their own community. So yeah, it's not ideal. And that's really why it really, focus of our work is very much community-based. So if a farmer's market's going to be started, somebody needs to be communicating with the community to determine where it should be, when it should be, all the different languages it should be advertised in, because a lot of times when these well-intentioned individuals make these decisions for the communities, it doesn't mean it's best for that community. So just from what I've seen.
Thank you, Lauren. That's so great to know. I'm just putting the link in the chat there to find farmers markets in your area. And we'll go on to the next question, which is from Mike. So for migrant workers, do minimum wage laws not apply?
Yeah, so in general, a lot of laws that protect workers don't apply to agricultural workers in general. So you have the same thing. Why are children allowed to work, right? Because there's a loophole. There's a loophole when the government created these laws that basically said children can work, because the belief at that time was that a lot of the farms were owned by the family and their kids would help out. But that's not what's happening today. So yeah, a lot of these laws that are in existence, they will have literal exemptions for agricultural workers.
It's awful. All right, so going to the next question. Thomas, I think this is similar to the one that was just answered earlier about farms that treat their workers well. So I'm going to move on to the next.
If you are in California, there is one farm that we know without a doubt that treats their farm workers well, and that's Swanton Berry in Santa Cruz area. So if you ever can be, even it's just a little paradise because you know the workers are treated great and they have signs about the workers and everything everywhere. So do check them out if you're not from California and you come out here, do check it out.
That's so great. Thank you. Okay, so Jazz asks, would it be appropriate to call oneself ethical vegan since I share similar values as those of Food Empowerment Project? Being a vegan in my community is considered selfish and or self-serving. Do you have any ideas? I want to change that association. Thank you.
Lauren, do you want to take a first shot at that one?
Sure. Well, yes, I think that if you are vegan because you're doing it, well, how do I put this? I would say that you're doing it for others, right? I mean, and the benefit then becomes that it's good for you too. But if you're doing it for the animals, you're doing it for the environment, you're doing it, there's so many reasons to go vegan that absolutely, I adore you even asking if you can call yourself that. Absolutely you can. You know what's in your heart. You know, and I don't know, I think that some of the way that the mainstream vegan movement has framed veganism does lend itself to selfishness, right? That we make it be like at all costs. It's about the non-human animals, or on the flip side of that is we make it be about our health or our fitness or losing weight instead of reframing the conversation that you are vegan to help others, which is human and non-human animals, right? So I think that it's you taking charge of how other people are defining it and having the confidence in your compassion, having the confidence in your beliefs, and not feeling guilty about caring. And I think that that's what happens too oftentimes, especially it's great when you're little and you like animals, right? But as you get older, somehow it's weird that you care about animals, and we got to change that way of looking at things to where it's okay to be compassionate, and I would challenge anybody to see how it is to be selfish, and I don't know, maybe it's one of those things where it's like you're with your family, because this happened to me and still happens to me, even though I've been vegan for over 30 years, like that I don't want to eat something that they made, and I'm selfish for not wanting to eat that. I don't, it's hard, right? Because you feel that, but at the same time, people should be respecting you. People who truly love and care about you should be respecting you. And really all you're doing is being compassionate. And I know that's a challenge for some people because somehow they think there's something political, when at the end of the day, which is my favorite saying, at the end of the day, all it is about caring and not wanting to harm somebody else. That's all it is at its finest point, is that. I don't know if that was helpful.
Thank you, Lauren. I thought that was great. All right, so the next question is from Tanya, and it is, I have recently heard that bees are exploited in the almond industry. Is this true?
Again, Lauren, you probably have the most knowledge.
No, I'm not as familiar with that, but I think that I know what you're talking about because they put the bee boxes, I don't know what they're called, right next to the almond trees. So that I'm assuming that's what you're referring to. And I think it's a pollination situation that's taking place there. But we as an organization haven't looked into it. That's not that we're not going to, but we just haven't yet.
Thanks for the question and the answer. All right, our next question is, if I donate to you all, where does the money go? I know with the school supplies you mentioned that it would go to that, but what about just a general donation?
That is a great question, and I'm going to try to respond to that one. So you will hear Food Empowerment Project talk about our various programs, right? We did that during today's event. We will send you information about our various programs. We post about it on social media as well. But so when you make a donation to our organization, it goes to support all of our work. one of the big things that we were able to launch this year, one of our little projects that we've been working on, not so, I wouldn't say little, it's been quite a big project that we've been working on, and we've hit the first milestone on it. Earlier in April, we launched Vegan Lao Food. So that's veganlaofood.com. It's one among the resources that we have that provides culturally relevant vegan recipes and meal options. And in addition, we have vegan Mexican food and vegan Filipino food. And then going forward through the year, we have various projects that we're working on. Among them, one of them is to produce an anti-dairy leaflet, and that will basically talk about the problems within the dairy industry, not just the animals, but also the human side of things, and how it impacts us as you know, some people still consume dairy. And so we are constantly coming up with resources. We update our website on a regular basis. And so your donation goes towards supporting all of the various resources that we're working on in order to be able to, you know, share that with the public as well. If anyone else wants to respond, then please go ahead.
Yeah, no, I'll chime in a little bit as the development associate here. So yeah, our you know, donations that you make go to supporting and keeping our organization up and running. You know, if you love the content that you see on social media, that's, you know, that maybe you reshare, you know, those things are done typically as a team. We create those resources. We have researchers who put in the time and effort, because we know it's really hard to find the right answer to things as far as food goes, and companies make it really hard to know whether or not what you're going to consume is ethical. So you know, Food Empowerment Project tries to do some of that work for you. So you know, I would say in general, yeah, if you're loving what you see on our website or our social media or anything like that, you know, that's part of what your donation goes to, as well as keeping everybody informed.
Thank you both. Our next question is from Riley again. I'm wondering if you have any tips on how to convince others that seem to get it but continue to eat animals. My family has said, I know I shouldn't, but I will. Is this just something I should move on from? And they also tell me they have to support small farms and I can't get through to them.
Yeah, Lauren, I'm wondering if this is one for you.
I think that one of the best things, and you know, is to move on. I think our families tend to be, you know, one of the hardest to have conversations with about it. It's not to say that they won't, and they might, but I think that that's a harder place to be. And so I think that do not feel bad about it. Don't feel like, oh, I can't even get my family. I'm more like, wow, you got your family? I mean, I think that's more impressive than anything, because I think our families see us in a particular way. And so I think it's best that you plant those seeds, always have those vegan foods available at get-togethers and things like that. Stick with your values, live your values, and don't worry about that. You know, sometimes leading by example means more than anything to people. And the way that the world is right now, I mean, you know, I went vegan in 1988. So, you know, my family has had this weird awakening and this realization that, like, wow, maybe I was onto something, you know. So your family might realize that too. And in terms of the small farms need their help, I would say that the majority of people who need our help, who do not get subsidies whatsoever, are the places that grow produce. Those farmers do not get the same subsidies. And there's so much money out there for these small farms right now that, you know, let your family know those people who raise and kill animals for food are in good hands. The government's giving them plenty of money. It's the broccoli growers. It's all of them who are having a harder time right now. So that's probably what should be supported more. Just my thoughts.
Thank you, Lauren. Those are some really important points. Okay, our last question is from Mark. What are some of the best ways to support Food Empowerment Project?
I can start answering that and potentially have others chime in as well. But I think some of the ways in which you can support us is by starting to really look at our content and look at why you should be vegan, look at why you should be using our resources, and then sharing those resources with people that you feel can really benefit from, either our vegan Lao food or vegan Mexican food or vegan Filipino food resources that we have online, our websites, or sharing with them pages from our website as well. In addition, I will say, as we covered before, what really helps sustain us and keep us going and being able to deliver programs such as what we're doing right now is actually donations to the organization. So we gave you all a link to our school supply drive that's coming up in June, but throughout the year, we are really looking for funds to be able to sustain, and to be honest, we would also like to grow because we really feel the need to be in other places. And Jas, thank you for your comment. We really do need satellite sites, and we've had plenty of requests for support from various parts of the country that we're hoping that we can soon deliver as we grow as an organization. And if anyone else wants to step in and add to that, please feel free.
I just wanted to share that, I know it can feel overwhelming with various organizations asking for donations, especially like on an individual. So, there are some easy ways, even if you, if you have friends and family who you think might be interested in our work, maybe you can start a little fundraiser on Facebook or through our website, Network for Good, for your birthday or Earth Day, things like that, really help, even just spreading the message. It's also really great if you like to forward people our newsletters, because we put a lot of time and effort and resources into those newsletters. So if you aren't already signed up, I really would recommend going to our website and signing up for our newsletter, and then forwarding that to other people who you think might find value in it. But there's always great stuff in there.
Great, thank you all. So that's all we have for questions. Thank you all for sending them in. I don't know if anyone else has anything to add before we close out.
I would just say thank you all for attending today's event and for your interest in learning how to eat with your ethics. Before you all go, I would like to pull up the upcoming events as well. Our next event will be on Sunday, August 15th at 1 p.m. Pacific time. And we will be covering yet another group of animals raised and killed for food, sea creatures. And we will tell you about our Fight for the Ocean effort and much more. So we hope you can join us then. Our final event for the series will be on Sunday, October 24th at 1 p.m. Pacific time, where we will talk more about the truth behind humane labels, such as cage-free, free-range, and more. And we hope you'll join us for both upcoming events. And like we said throughout the event, please do invite your friends and share with your social networks. And we will be sending out a post-event survey to everyone. So we hope you'll take the time to fill it out, and it will really help us improve future events. So enjoy the rest of your Sunday. Thank you for being with us again, and see you at the next event. Bye, everyone.